Today's episode is brought to you by Paystack, one of the continent's most prominent fintechs, helping businesses in Africa get paid by anyone, anywhere in the world. Now, more than that, Paystack powers ambitious African startups with a suite of world-class payment APIs. And more recently, they've launched Paystack Catalyst, a free credit program and bespoke toolkit to accelerate startup growth on the continent. Visit paystack.com to learn more. Welcome to the Startup Club podcast, where we share the journeys of invention, failure, resilience, and triumph of some of South Africa's foremost tech startup founders and investors. I'm Mathew Marsden, founder of Startup Club ZA, and on the show today, the story of Donald Valoyi, how a self-taught developer left his corporate job to start selling second-hand textbooks to students across South Africa's universities before pivoting to found what would become Zulzi, one of the country's leading last-mile, same-day delivery startups that's gone on to raise millions in capital to support its growth.
To me, it was very clear that everything is possible, So I started dreaming even bigger, thinking like, if these guys can do it, I can also do it, So that also really played a big part.
Amazing. According to a 2021 report by Trade Intelligence, the South African online grocery delivery market was estimated to be around 6 billion rand. But Statista.com estimates those numbers may in fact double by the end of the current calendar year. It's now uncommon for most formal market South Africans to not be acquainted with some form of online grocery delivery service, with major retailers like Shoprite establishing strong market share through the likes of Checkers 6060. But almost a decade ago, when Donald Valoyi started working on the first version of what would become Zulzi, the world and online shopping looked very different, with e-commerce and ride-hailing still gaining very early traction. Now, among the first to market in South Africa, Zulzi emerged as a startup success story from the COVID-19 pandemic, and during the season doing over R1 million in turnover a day and growing exponentially since. They've also attracted tens of millions in investment, including that from the Shoprite Group themselves in 2020. But it didn't start there. Donald Valoyi grew up in Limpopo, South Africa's northernmost province, as one of 5 siblings. He attended primary and secondary school in the area, and with mining being one of the province's predominant industries, he had his mind set on becoming an engineer.
Thanks, Matthew. I grew up in a village called Soshi, that's in Limpopo. It's like, if I recall back then, we didn't even have electricity, we didn't have water, so it was standard, a lot of villages, you just go around, go to a river, try and get some water, play like normal kids that we used to do back then, and then my dad was a pastor, so my PK. My
My mom was a pastor.
Oh,
actually, yeah. So clearly we're meant to be on the show today.
Yeah. And then my mother then started a preschool. Okay. I think those two people, I think they really shaped who I am. In fact, when I look at both of them, right, my father is very ambitious, big dreamer. My mother get things done, right. She doesn't just dream only, but she implements things,
Sure.
And I think I learned a lot from those two people.
Amazing.
So that, I think the two really shaped out who I became, who I am today,
And how would you describe yourself as a kid or even as a teenager? Were you specifically social? Were you quite curious about the world around you? Did you just have big aspirations to make it one day? I mean, how would you describe yourself as?
I think growing up, I was very funny in class. Like,
Sure.
I was probably one of the funniest guys in class. So even teachers, even the teachers, everybody knew that. Like, every time I opened my mouth, the whole class would be laughing.
Sure.
Sure. So I think I was very playful, but at the same time, I think I was very ambitious. As much as I was, I didn't have everything. I wasn't one of the richest kids in school, but I was very, very ambitious, I always dreamt of owning 100 pirates, at an early, like very young age, I spent a lot of time, for instance, in primary, looking at like the players that I would buy if I was actually assuming that now I've got pirates.
Sure.
And now like trying to like write down which players I'll acquire, how much salary I'll pay them. you know.
The businessman in you, very
Yeah,
early,
yeah.
right?
So those things really, like, when I look back, I was like, oh, that was crazy, actually, you know. So I would say I was very ambitious. You know, I didn't really allow the circumstances around my upbringing to sort of like stop the dream that I had.
Sure.
You know, so I still had the big dream of doing something big.
And even with humble beginnings and just this environment you're raised in, were you quite entrepreneurial? Were you the kid that was starting the side hustle, selling whatever you could get your hands on? Were you that type of kid, or were you more just linear, go to school, come home?
I only did that, like, I remember in primary, I lost my textbooks.
Yes.
And I knew I was going to get a hiding at home. So I didn't even have to tell them that I lost my textbooks. So I had to build small cars and sell them, you know. So I built a couple of cars, sold them. But it wasn't really, it wasn't a business for me. It was more like I had a problem and I had to solve that problem, and it needs money. So I had to raise, I remember quite well, it was about 10 rand, right, that I had to raise. So I had to build cars and sell them. Maybe I sold about 3 cars, you know, beautiful cars. And then I raised the money, and then I was able to buy textbooks. So yeah, that's who I was back then. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. These are just small anecdotes of one's life, but you then start to see a lot of parallels as you've got older, and you go, okay, maybe like, there's that resourcefulness, right? I've got a problem, I'm going to fix a way, I'll find a way to fix it. Bring in income, kind of roll that process over.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so today when I look back, I'm like, okay,
maybe
it made sense.
and maybe Pirates, for our non-South African listeners, is one of the more prominent South African football clubs.
Yeah,
maybe Pirates is still on the cards. Who knows?
Who knows exactly?
Who knows?
Yeah.
So Donald, you finished school in Limpopo.
Yeah.
And of course, mining being particularly prominent in the province, it's, I think, a career choice for a lot of folks. Were your grades good? Were you a good student in the sense that, you know, any career was an option? I know you were kind of looking at it as the prospective industry, but were you like a wonder kid at school, or?
Yeah, look, I think, let me say, like, in my school, right, I think one of the most important things there back then is it was standard that as a student, you wouldn't do maths on higher grade, you know. I still remember when I got to grade 11, it was very clear that like students in grade 12, there was just no maths in higher grade. Like I look back, I had to do my research, ask around as to like, who has ever taken maths on higher grade, and it was very clear no one had ever done that, you know. And to me, it became clear that I'm facing a massive challenge here, right? I need to change these things around, you know. So that December, I actually spent a lot of time like reading. I had to like study, get past the exam papers. Like I didn't have to wait for January for the teachers, because in fact, funny enough, like our teacher at the time, they didn't even teach maths on higher grade, you know. So by Jan that year, I remember when I went to class, because I spent a lot of time in December, like I studied the whole syllabus. By the time the school reopened, I was ready, and I had more confidence that I was going to do better. Focusing a lot on mathematics, because I knew that that's the course that I have to, that's the subject that I must make sure I do well in it, you know. And then fortunately I was able to do very well. I became one of the first students to really achieve good marks from that school. But then again, when I reflect on that, it just shows you that like if you put your mind and effort towards anything, you can do anything. You know, there's no excuse on where you grew up, the history, you know, like you can reverse that. You can be the first person to change it. And that's the mindset that I had back then, to say, you know what, I'm going to change these things. I'm going to be the first student who actually will go out there, pass maths on higher grade, get good grades that can enable me to do any course that I want to do.
Amazing. And that's the case for many people in our generation, right? Is we are the first of many to do a lot of those things. You actually end up going to study a BSc in maths. Right, which is just phenomenal. I think 2003 to 2007 at Wits.
I think, look, I mean, as much as I wanted to do engineering, I somehow found myself in science.
Yes. But you actually decided to make quite an interesting career pivot. And again, this is an initial interest in mining and engineering. You then go to mathematics and more focus on the sciences. You then decide to pivot into becoming a self-taught developer, which again today is like, well, that's the thing, right? So if I want to make it, I've got to know how to code. But I mean, this is the very early 2000s. Talk us through this. Why?
Look, I think
what was the reason?
My brother had a big influence on that decision. I think my brother also self-taught, software developer. He was actually, at that time, I think he used to convince almost everyone that you must just do software. Software is going to become such a big thing. You know? I remember back then, I think in 1996, Java just came out, and he used to call himself a Java evangelist, you know. So I really became very interested in IT. Started reading stuff, reading books, Java development, doing stuff. I wasn't doing it to get a job, I was just doing it out of interest, and that's how I landed my first job. And then I got my first job. It was in Cape Town, a company called Mathew. I remember I took a bus to go to Cape Town, and then when I got there, did an interview, and then I got everything right, and the guys were really blown away,
Amazing.
So that's how the interest of software started.
Did you get this job and go like, this is what I want to do with my life? This confirms it? I
think, but already I knew that I want to do something bigger, right? So even that company, right, as much as I was junior, I still remember at some point, like, I was already like trying to advise them that they should get acquired, which was, I think it was crazy when I think about it, right? Like I was already thinking like, so I was like, maybe we should look at a way, to sell this. And then it happened later on, So I was already thinking of something big, even though I wasn't able to play that role in that business because I was still junior, still learning stuff, right? But I was already thinking of like, how can we do something bigger,
Elevate things.
So that was my first job in Cape Town. I think I worked there for 2 years and joined another company called ICG. Was there for a year before moving up here in Joburg.
And so after those 2 years, you moved to Johannesburg. And just tell me, you spent some time working for the likes of MTN and First National Bank.
So we used to do some project for MTN, your MTN Active, where like people could sort of like browse things online, not order it, but just to see that it's there, it exists, view different packages, So online wasn't like, there wasn't much into it,
E-commerce was the commerce side of E was
it was just the E only.
Right? It was just the E.
Exactly.
Pure observe.
Yeah, exactly. And I also had some. I think one of the things maybe is worth mentioning as well is, even like adversity. In fact, one of the things that really changed how I used to think about things as well is access to the internet. Right. My brother was working he wasn't working for iBest at the time, but he was very close to Tammy, the late Tammy. Tammy started iBest. So I remember back then I used to have access to the internet. They gave me internet, and I was probably the only student at RAS who had internet, when iBest came out, So that was quite cool, This student from a village now had internet.
Even some of the city kids didn't, right?
So So it was really, really cool. That also really sparked a lot of interest, in this online space, starting to do stuff in the internet. On the business side as well, I started to see these guys that, wow, this guy, the late Tammy, he was like doing these things, I remember when Santon City is promoting this iBest thing, and we there, So it was really, it really made it, to me it was very clear that everything is possible, So I started dreaming even bigger, thinking like, if these guys can do it, I can also do it, So that also really played a big part.
Amazing. Yeah, it's sometimes it's just about meeting the right people at the right time. It enlarges one's worldview entirely, right? You see someone else who's done it, and
Yeah, no,
it's a pretty
definitely. And when you
incredible
look
thing.
when you look back, you're like, oh, okay, cool, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You and the small things, like you can really, like, for instance, my brother, one of the things he used to do as well was to show me his payslip. That really helped me a lot. I knew exactly how much I'm gonna earn for my first job.
Yes.
So I didn't start from scratch.
Underpaid as well, right?
Yeah.
Which is very fair.
So that helped a lot.
Yeah.
So and definitely working for those companies like MTI and FNB as well, it really did, like, open up doors, meeting new people as well. So it was quite interesting.
So let's quickly talk about F&B, because after your agency work for the likes of MTM, you did join F&B in shared services,
Yeah.
global transaction services.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is very different, right? This is an enterprise now. We're talking hundreds of folks around you. You are one of many developers in a team.
Yeah.
And a few things happen at F&B which actually go on to become quite formative, I think, for your career in general. The first is obviously meeting Mike, who ends up really co-founding the Zulzi business with you in time. And the second is maybe just the exposure you're getting to large scale projects of ridiculous sizes. So maybe firstly tell us about how did you meet Mike?
No, so Mike actually was at UCT.
Okay.
He was a friend of my brother, very, very close. He was one of the victims that my brother managed to convince. He was actually studying engineering.
Yes.
But my brother convinced him that actually...
This is Chief Evangelist, the Java Evangelist.
Yeah, the Java Evangelist was going around, like, looking for people he can convince,
Interesting.
And he was one of the victims who was convinced to be in IT.
Okay.
And I still remember how he used to, like, he had to take courses on computer science while studying engineering, because he was already convinced by this evangelist that you have to do IT stuff, So I knew of Mike. So these are all, Mike is, like, just a little bit older than me. So I knew of Mike through my brother. So my brother would come back and tell me about Mike. Oh, there's this great guy. They were doing a lot of stuff, like, together. They tried to, like, start a company called Objective Logic, looking into software stuff. So he will tell me about those guys, right? So then when I was at FNB, I was looking to move from shared services, and then I was fortunate to get a position at GTS. Yep. And then fortunate enough as well to work with Mike. So we're working the same team, and he was my boss.
Okay. Yeah. So does he ever let you live that down? At some stage, he was your boss, right? Okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that was quite interesting. And then we became very close. We shared a lot of things in common, I still remember we'll take a long walk in CBD, talking about how things were there. And it was very clear that we had to sort of, like, start something, and then that's how we ended up, like, studying, like he actually went to start a company called Nandi.
Yep.
And then I went the other side to start Zulzi back in those days.
Yeah, interesting. Talk about this first step into starting a company of your own. And I know it centers around a friend of yours who was selling second-hand books to students on universities. Yeah. Which becomes quite instrumental even in what Zulzi becomes as a technology business, and then pivots away from, like, maybe talk us through this first foray into starting a business of your own. Yeah.
So actually what happened is these guys, they were selling books at UCT, right? It was second-hand books. And what was clear to me is I could see that there was a little bit of market, even though there was, like, the guys would probably make 10, 15,000 rand. What I saw there, it was an opportunity to make a lot more money, right? So the first thing I did was to invest in that business. And then I had one of my brother who wasn't working at the time, and I got him to go there to run it, So we're able to sort of, like, move it from, like, 15,000 to 150,000 rand,
Yep.
And it was very clear that this thing is working,
Were you doing this whilst you were still at the bank?
Yeah, I was still at the bank. Okay. So I was in, like, full time on it, right?
Yep.
And then I started looking at, like, how can I then get new publishers, right? So I started approaching publishers, open accounts with them. so I can get new books from them, you know. So I started to study that market, look at Joe Van Skyke, all of those guys. And I was like, okay, I can do this, you know. So the target back then, when I remember, I was targeting to do about 1 million rand turnover. That's when I was like, okay, cool, I can quit my job.
Yes.
Now we're pivoting to like we're building a platform where people can order stuff online.
Okay, cool.
It's new books, you know. We think like we're the first guys who are going to be offering this kind of service, right? There's no one who's actually selling books online.
And this is 2012, 2013.
Yeah, 2012, yeah.
Yes,
So
I mean, at the time, this is uncommon.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So build the platform. I still remember when I was building the platform, Mike came as well. He was assisting to build it.
Yes.
We built our first book online.
And you guys built this e-commerce platform from scratch, or was it a bit of a white label, or you bought
we built it from scratch.
Amazing.
We built it from scratch. We were very excited about recommendations, a lot of things that Amazon was doing at the time.
Yes.
So there was a lot of pride in that platform, even though the UI didn't look so great. But yeah, we took a lot of pride in it, you know. And then we launched the platform. I've got this crazy target of reaching 1 million rand in sales within the first 2 months, which I think was crazy.
Yes.
And then as we're doing that, it was very clear that people were not interested in buying books online, right? Like I still remember I had to find ways to promote this business. One of the things I had to do back then, right, was to go to, because I realized that we don't even have a way to reach the students, right? So one of the things that I remember well was I would go around campus, take pictures of the notice board, because they had student numbers there, and those student numbers will represent the email address.
Yes.
So once you've got those pictures, we'll take the pictures and then convert them to a student number, right?
Sorry, universities of South Africa for this life hack. If folks are taking photos.
Yeah.
Yes.
So so we'll take that and then try and convert that into an email.
Interesting.
But funny enough, even those things, right? You could see that like we didn't get traction from it, you know. And I still remember like we're running out of time, and now we have to. It's either I'm going to be sitting there with 1 million rand worth of stock, and publishers are going to be on my neck, or I have to do something, right? And what was also clear was that like I have to go back to work because here I am, I'm unemployed.
Just to clarify for the listeners, I mean you've now left employment, right?
Yeah, I've left.
No investor. Again, you're a young entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You don't really have the network to access capital, readily available capital, not yet at the time at least. And
also, I was not looking for an investor. I was thinking I'm there to make money.
Yeah, of course. Which, by the way, is a refreshing mentality. For most founders even today.
Yeah, like I didn't know about this thing of raising money. I was thinking like you go into business to make money. So I was just surprised that money's not coming, you know.
And to your point that you made earlier, I mean, you held over R1 million of books, right, in physical stock. This is stock you had purchased to resell, right?
Yeah.
And again, you weren't selling it fast enough. And just for context for the listeners today, these were sitting in your 3-bedroom flat in Four Ways, in the living room and the spare room,
everywhere.
You are 27 years old, married, and you are about to have your firstborn.
Yeah, exactly.
So just for any founders listening in today who don't think this was real, was a real proper founding jump from corporate into I've got to make this thing work. Like those are some of the realities of what you were facing. Yeah,
so I had a bill to pay. Wife is pregnant, doesn't have a job. My wife is a qualified CA, but at the time she was not employed.
Yes.
The timing, it wasn't the perfect timing, right? You know, like I hear a lot of people say, make sure you've saved up enough money.
Is it ever the case? Right?
The thing is, it's also very difficult because, most of the time when you start something, you don't know, right? A lot of things like, even 100,000 you might think is enough, but when you start a business, you realize that 100,000 is gone. But the most important thing is the ability to solve problems very quickly, So in my case, as I was doing this thing, again, remember what I spoke about when I lost the textbooks when I was still young, and I had to find a way to raise money, that came up again, now when I was older, I'm sitting with 1 million worth of stock. It's not moving, right? It was clear to me that I need to find something very quickly. One of the things was to go to universities, set up stands, like have a gazebo, put it there, and now it's just like a bookshop, So people are coming in, West Campus at Vets. When you're coming out from a lecture, you find the guys with economics books, Some of the students were assuming that those books were stolen because they were thinking like, how did this...
I might have walked past you actually. I think I was at Vets in and around this, maybe just finished just before that, but
yeah.
But I think you told me this and I had a good chuckle. People assumed they were stolen books because they were in such good condition.
Yeah, like it's were your books. Yeah, like they were very sure, like, and also like it was discounted, right? Because at that time, I just needed money. I was no longer thinking about like publishers. I was thinking about like, how can I get enough money so I don't have to go back to work? Like if I can delay that, I can make another plan,
Sure. Now, as you're selling from this table, you also found quite an interesting opportunity in the mobile and device and electronics space.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you mentioned to me that you started looking to sell a lot of the electronic gadgets, maybe even cell phones online at some point. Talk to us about how this kind of progresses. You go from books to cell phones, and then where is this moment where you go, man, we're actually onto something, or I don't have to go back to work?
Yeah, so that happened. So like Jan, Feb, I was on the books. Now you can see that, okay, books have been tough and there's no way you can recover. You're not going to sell more books in March, But I was sitting with 300,000 Rand in cash, right, that I had recovered from that million Rand. So from that million Rand, I got 300,000 Rand in sales, right? Which I think when you look back, it wasn't bad. It's just like I was aiming way too high, right? So 300,000 Rand sitting with it, I was thinking, what else can I do, Because remember, 300,000 not profit, by the way. We're no longer counting profit.
No, of course.
It's 300,000 Rand cash.
Yes.
Not enough to pay publishers, but probably enough to do something, right? And that's when I started like looking at like low entry level gadgets, and then I started selling gadgets, and that's where I saw like a huge demand for the gadgets, and then I was able to sort of like get enough money to pay those publishers. And also not to go back to work, So that's how my entrepreneurship then started. And then I was like, okay, cool. Now I've got this. Now I'm doing this,
2014, you actually also have this interesting foray into trying to sell traditional clothing on the site. So again, the site is just moving from almost product line to product line. Maybe talk us through that, because that was quite an interesting experiment as well, yeah?
Yeah, that piece, I think, when the traditional outfit came out, like it was very hard to find traditional clothes anywhere, right? And I still remember back then, there were some guys called Bow Africa. And then I went there to CBD and they were busy sewing there. I could see how busy it was, And then I struck a deal with those guys to say, what, like I'm going to put your stuff on my platform, right? Put your dresses in my platform.
Was the platform called Zulzi at the time?
Yeah, it was
already
Zulzi.
Cool. So it's
already Zulzi. Really so in fact, like when we were selling secondhand books, it was called Eurobooks.
Okay.
But then the name changed to Zulzi. I still remember like I had to even get like a proper designer to get me the logo that we're still using today. Paid about 10,000 at the time, which was a heavy investment because I believe so much in this concept that we're building something big, right? And then when the guy, let me say when I actually approached those guys, right, to ask them if they can come onto our platform, right, to sell dresses, because remember, like now Zulzi, it was more like this platform's not gonna sell books only. As much as we started with books, we can sell almost anything, you know. So I went in to approach this guy, say, guys, come on, come into our platform. You sell dresses, right, on our platform. And the guys agreed, but you could see they were very busy. And then we put their stuff on the platform, and it was very clear that the demand there was crazy. It was better than books, because for books, it was very hard for you to even have enough visitors. When I checked on Google Analytics, you could see that a lot of people were not really searching for books. But for clothing, it was clear.
Yeah.
Everybody was going into Zulzi. Like, we'll get, I still remember, you log into Google Analytics and you see that there's about 700 users that are on the platform. Whereas with books, you just have 2-3 users.
Sure.
Now it was very clear that there is something now.
Yes.
People want this thing.
Yep.
But the problem is, when people started placing orders, those guys were just way too busy. They didn't care about online. They had their own problems. And then, here I am sitting, orders are coming in. Now I need to solve the problem of like, how do I get the stock?
I assume you can't sew.
Well, you were wrong.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Maybe not well.
Then I had to solve it again,
Yeah.
Then I went, bought machines, hired someone.
Amazing.
Started designing those things, the dresses. Started selling them in December. I think it was 2013. Started selling dresses online. I think we got the sizes wrong. So there was a lot of returns. And I was like, okay, cool. We're not, this space is just too complicated, especially for traditional clothing, because if you try and do that at scale, a lot of people, their sizes were just like, like this one is like, their shape is like this. That's why, like when you sell those dresses, you must go there, they must measure you, right? So it was just hard to scale that piece online. And then I made a call that, no, actually this is not going to work out. Even though the demand was there, but I could see that now I'm actually doing something different to what I wanted to do. Now I'm in sewing. I was going to CBD looking for people, like in some dodgy places.
Yes.
So I was like, no, like let me leave this one. I guess for me, the most important thing that I learned from there is just doing things, right? Like the ability to do things, right? Like most of the time you sit around, maybe meetings. That's why even with meetings, I don't like meetings where we're just talking. I like meetings where we can do something.
Sure.
Like if there's a problem, let's do, let's do a demo on where the problem is. If all the stakeholders are there, let's see where the problem is.
Sure.
So there's so much power in doing things. So like if there's anything that we can do now, rather do it now. And I always ask everyone in the office as well, like when they're talking, coming up with presentation, I'm like, what can you do now, right? So if we just practice that to do things like now, then the sky is the limit.
Amazing. Let's fast forward to 2016.
Yeah.
You make an interesting, almost full circle decision to come back to focusing on books in Zulzi's future, but something quite formative, I think, that's even started to define Zulzi's mandate today, but also broader industry, I think. You introduced two-hour delivery on these books, and that becomes quite formative, right? Because quick commerce was not a thing at 2015, 2016 in South Africa. So this idea of getting items that you paid for online quickly was almost unheard of.
Yeah.
Maybe talk us through that revelation that you had.
Yeah, and also let me say, I never really left the books, right? So the books continued. Okay. So it was more like finding things to sell, like creating a marketplace that can sell more stuff.
Sure.
So remember, books were very seasonal.
Yeah.
So it was more like, if it's December, what else can I sell with this platform, right?
Sure.
But then also, like, as I was doing that, I also realized that, even selling clothes, right? I realized how different that category is to books. So like even how you present those things, the sizes, even the platform had to be changed quite a lot to accommodate just selling books. That's why then I started to have a better understanding of like what will make something like a super app work, and it's highly complicated that I actually don't encourage people to do it on the first go because you're just solving so many problems
at once,
right? But the truth is, when you start like not running away from problems, right? And digging deep as to like, how can I get this to scale, right? Because that ultimately became the question, instead of like us maybe focusing on different other categories. It was very clear that the student market, as much as it wasn't big enough, right? I think at the time when I looked at it, it was probably like a 400 or 500 million rand market, for universities, It was very clear that people are actually buying books somewhere, right? But they're not coming to us. And how do we fix that? So one of the key problems that was there was the fact that like, as much as there were all these online platforms, in fact, at the time when we were doing that, like the Kalahari started to target that market. You Take a Lot as well, where, there was still Kalahari and Take a Lot really going at each other. I still remember when they came with like big trucks, big banners outside vets. And I was thinking these guys are going to take my market share like crazy.
Sure. Eat my lunch very quickly.
Yeah, but what was clear there is students were not moved by that.
Yeah.
And the problem was, it was not just pricing only. It was, how quickly can you give it to me, right? And also, can I trust you, right? So obviously the paying with a credit card, it was definitely not going to happen because students just didn't have credit card.
Sure.
And also you can just imagine like a student coming from a village as well, coming to vets, and all of a sudden you buy books online, and those books never arrive, whatever the case is. There's just too much risk for them.
Chaos.
So some of the things we had to solve was like, how do you do cash on delivery, and also how do you deliver quickly to students? So in that way, then the question of like them having to walk to a bookshop, you can eliminate it. And then when you start delivering quickly, that's when we saw an uptick, a huge uptick. And all of a sudden I could see that actually these people, what they were looking for was speed. So speed was the most important thing that students were looking for. If I can place my order and you deliver quickly, it means I can tell more people about these services that I just order stuff online and I got it very quickly. And that's when we started doing quick delivery. So we started going out there. I was the guy driving a van, place an order. I had my books with me there. It's coming to you right away. That's when we introduced like 1 hour delivery to students. It actually was 2 hour delivery, but most of it will deliver within 1 hour. And then I became very ambitious about now scaling this, not just for books only, but for different categories.
Absolutely.
It was very clear to me that there's actually a big
people
market.
care about time.
The time is more important. And that's when they pivot to sort of like build an app that will enable people to order groceries, food, pharmaceuticals, alcohol.
Amazing.
That's when it started.
So before we get there, though, probably worthwhile just mentioning you had entered an SAB initiative called Kickstart, and fortunate to win about 700 grand from that. You certainly didn't rest on your laurels there. You actually buy 2 tuk-tuks for the business to add to probably this one van that you have.
So those 2 tuk-tuks were meant to deliver books. But I think that money also came late, right? So that season of books was already over. And then and then at the time I was already thinking like I was now into this app, So the first thing I did was like, okay, let's get tuk-tuks. So we bought 2 tuk-tuks. Funny enough, the plan there was to deliver in 15 minutes, and I can still see that tuk-tuk, written Zulzi, and then delivered in 15 minutes, right?
I actually think I remember seeing the first Zulzi ads to say, get your groceries in 15 minutes, and thinking to myself, like, that's insane.
And then...
how are these guys even doing that? Do they have... I couldn't get my mind around it. But it's such a memorable campaign because it was such an audacious statement to make, right? Like
that's how we started with this. Like we wanted to deliver quickly. We didn't know like what is the time that would make sense, but 15 minutes to me it looked like it was reasonable. But when we get into it, we realized there was a lot of logistics.
The complexities of doing this in 15 minutes is very hard. Before we get into really the new kind of Zulzi 2.0 and this app that you've described, I want to quickly just also revisit the fact that Mike would come on as your co-founder. Still wasn't full-time in this business at the time, right? You'd talk to us about how you actually get Mike to come in full-time. I know he was working on his own thing. He was doing a bit of consulting because this is actually quite interesting to me. A lot of founders who start something are incredibly equity sensitive. They are not willing to give up any shares to get great talent into the business. And especially if someone hasn't joined from day one, it can often be quite a contentious thing. Yet you and Mike have managed to navigate that, I think, incredibly amicably. And I'd love that if you could share with the listeners today.
So I think what happened is as this idea of the app came out, right, to say let's build an app. So Zulzi was there, like, you're delivering books and everything else, right? Now we're pivoting to an app, right? So the first thing that happened was, okay, cool. Yeah, I've got this concept, crazy concept. Want to do this thing. Mike comes in. Mike is excited about it, right? So
you've also told me in the past, Mike is exceptional. I mean, as a developer, he's just world class.
His tech is amazing, right? So we're working on this thing. It's coming there, but there's no, like, in fact, the first thing I did was to say, you know what, I'm going to give you 100,000 Rand, right? Like it was supposed to be a monthly salary, but
it's like a signing bonus.
You only got it once.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. So we're working on this thing, and the passion is there, right? And I mean, the most important thing is really not, as much as you want to protect the equity, the most important thing is to make things work, right? Like if it doesn't work, then there's no business after all, right?
Yeah,
so I think the good thing as well, Mike was just there, like really, like he became very passionate. He's passionate, and you can see that this guy is actually, he has now bought into the dream. And before you knew it, even the other side project he was working on, they were no longer getting attention because now he believes in this thing, So to me, it was a no-brainer to say, dude, like, you have to get some equity in this business, right? Because I can see the commitment. We share the same vision. We enjoy working with each other. So it really made sense that we joined hands together, and that was the best decision I made. So
Absolutely.
I was comfortable.
Okay.
It was very comfortable that this guy is committed.
Amazing.
This guy is the guy I can go to war with,
Yes, amazing.
And when we get there, what's important is not going to run away. He's a guy
who, he's in the trench with you.
He will go to the trenches with you. And we went through the trenches together, So that was, I think, to me, that was very, very important. That, that's how we approached this thing. And today we don't regret any of that.
Amazing, brilliant. Again, new look Zulzi goes live with Mike on board. September 2016, if I can recall. You are now selling fast food, liquor, and groceries, and you're focusing on delivering in a quick time. Of course, you're still a new platform, so you're not working with big name retailers. You're typically looking at stockists, right? Individual stockists, stores. How do I get from a slightly smaller business to your door?
So actually, when we started, right, like, so in 2016, the first thing I did before we launched, right, I remember there used to be this restaurant. We used to eat there every day in Braamfontein, right? I was so confident that lady was going to come on board to our platform.
Yes.
And then I bought a camera, went to Macro, bought an expensive camera, went there, tell her that we already take pictures for the food. And she said, no, I'm not going to the platform, right? And I remember I was even thinking, this lady is probably just a racist,
Yes.
But it wasn't the case, right? And again, like...
it's a very new concept, right?
Yeah. And also, like, like sometimes as an entrepreneur, like, you will get rejected. I see a lot of people, they get rejected once and they say, that's it, right? But if you want to be great at whatever things that you do, you find ways to navigate it, So after that, to me, it was clear that if this lady on a small shop can say no to us, how about KFC? How about Chicken Licken? How about Pick and Pay? All those big retailers, it was very clear that we're not going to be able to convince any of those big guys. So that really helped me, because from that day, I knew that we need to navigate that problem, right? And you find that actually those things that we think are a problem are not really, you just need to navigate around it, And how we navigated around that issue of not having partnerships was to actually go around the stores, get all their menus, capture them onto the platform, right? All the online, the other guys, the retailers who had like online presence, like Pick and Pay, Woolworth, will scrap all their data, pricing, road robots that will take everything, put into our platform, right?
Amazing.
So day one when we launched, we had everything. We had like your restaurants, we had your grocery stuff, everything from this camp. But there was no partnership. They didn't even know who we were at the time. We're the first guys to sell Chicken Licken online.
Yes.
And they actually called me to say, take it out.
Chicken Licken didn't know about this, right?
They didn't know, and when they find out, they asked me to take it offline.
Yes.
And I did. I just took it off. I just commented, and customers were crying. Remember that time there was no time to even make an announcement to say Chicken Licken is no longer here.
Sure.
You just see it not appearing.
Sure. Devastation across the user base,
and then the
right?
customers were like, what's going on with Zulzi? There's no Chicken Licken anymore,
Yeah, sure.
But you just have to be careful that it mustn't destroy your business. You just need to make sure that like you are careful around it, how you navigate that. So that really helped us to launch Zulzi as a platform, and a lot of customers were thinking, these guys have got partnerships with these guys. What was happening behind the scenes, as a customer, you place an order, we go to the stores, we must go with a card, we pay for the items.
So I actually, so let's paint the practicalities of that, because you've told me this quite funny story in the past of one of your very first transactions. That again, you had to go and deliver yourself, but it involved you being at the Four Ways Park Run.
Yeah, I was in a
Well,
park run.
won't you share this with our listeners today? I think it's such a wonderful picture of
Yeah.
a founder getting his hands dirty and the reality of stuff not necessarily going to plan, but making it work.
Yeah, so what happened that day, I think it's after we launched. I think we launched on a Friday. We released our app. And then I remember after launching the app, I would also drive around with the tuk-tuk, going in 4 ways, like everywhere, like driving around so that people can see the tuk-tuk, right? And driving it slowly, park it everywhere, and then Friday, there was no order. And then Saturday morning, I checked before I went to park run, there's nothing, right? There's no order. And then I went for park run in the morning in Lone Hill. I think it was supposed to be like an hour, but that was very slow. By the time I got home, I think it was around 12, right? 12 in the morning. And then I got home super tired. I was like, let me check this app of ours.
Back end.
Sure. Let me check, and there's nothing that tells you if there's an order, right? You must go in, must log in, refresh this thing. Went in there, and then there's an order that was placed for breakfast from Rocco Mama's, right? And then I had to run quickly to Rocco Mama's. When I got there, I don't have a card. I forgot the card at home. And the lady refused to place my order. She's like, you know what, I can only place your order when you've paid for it. So I had to run back home, got my card. By the time I placed my order and got to a customer, I think it was around 2 a.m. So I got there with breakfast at 2 a.m. 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Yeah, 2 p.m. Yeah, and I remember when I got there, the guy really was so disappointed.
Sure.
So I had to really apologize. And the funny part is, I think it really he bought the story. He understood that he gave us a chance, and I thank him as well. To say, yeah, you know what, like, dude, you were just trying this thing out, and thank you for trying it out. We're gonna perfect things, gonna improve things. But we had a long conversation, and the guy really believed in what we're doing, and he became a loyal customer of Zulzi.
Amazing.
Even today, I still meet him around and still joke about it. So yeah, so that was crazy, and I think we had a lot of moments like that where you had to deliver stuff to your customers by yourself. In fact, there's a lot you can learn from that even today, right? Like, if you understand your business better, the best way to understand it even today as it's growing bigger is to actually go on a car or whatever to go and deliver the orders to the customers.
Actually really engage and understand experience.
Yeah, that's the quickest way to also solve the real problems, right? Because, as your business grow, there's so many things you can solve, but but you find that there's those things that even yourself, when you look at it, like, damn, my courier's going through this, or are my pickers going through this, or my customers going through this. So that was very valuable at that time.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We're going to take a quick break. I'm Mathew Marsden, and this is the Startup Club podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Paystack, one of the continent's most prominent fintechs, helping businesses in Africa get paid by anyone, anywhere in the world. Now, more than that, Paystack powers ambitious African startups with a suite of world-class payment APIs. And more recently, they've launched Paystack Catalyst, a free credit program and bespoke toolkit to accelerate startup growth on the continent. Visit paystack.com to learn more. And in these first few months, you're solving a whole bunch, right? Not only just quick delivery time, you're solving for fraudulent transactions, you're solving for people wanting to pay on demand because you do allow that facility, and that actually risks drivers yourself being held up. And I think you told me a story of someone placing such a big order and wanting to pay cash on demand, and you actually being quite afraid, like, this I'm probably going to get held up here, but it was actually a proper legit order.
Yeah, actually, I still remember one of these orders. It was, there were some areas where we knew that if someone placed an order, and they live in this flat or this location, it's probably fraudulent, right? So I still remember this other day, it was raining and people are just busy. They're ordering food, and there was this huge order for Nando's, and it was going somewhere just after Hillbrow, by that side of Hillbrow, Joburg CBD. And on my way there, as I'm checking this address, I'm thinking, okay, this is definitely one of those addresses where, it's a fraudulent order. And that day we've been working tirelessly, And as I'm driving there, I'm thinking, shouldn't I just eat this food? I was so close to opening the bag and have one piece of Nando's, because I'm thinking definitely this is gonna be fraudulent, But somehow something is just said to me, maybe you're already here, Let's face this thing, you know. And then when I got there, it was a family, like, and their kids, and I'm thinking,
Imagine
had I eaten that food?
Yes. You built some systems to augment some of this in-person intuition.
Yeah.
Don't want to fast forward too much here, but again, I think just for listeners' sake, you go on to hire 3 drivers. At the time, you're still not really making money, though, right? I mean, it's not a profitable business in the sense that you were doing a lot of turnover, but this was a growth stage of the company, right? So you're doing almost R1 million a month at that time. 90% of that was fast food, and 10% was groceries. But contextually, this is end 2016. It's important to now remember that your players like Uber Eats, Mr. Delivery, who are exclusively focusing on fast food.
Yeah.
And again, you're being compared to them directly.
Yeah.
Really double down in that space. And so it becomes hyper competitive. And you make a really key decision not to try and compete, which I think is sometimes almost anti-establishment, right? Founders are like, we're there to disrupt the status quo. We can take down the big guys.
Yeah.
But sometimes you've got to be sober about the market you're taking on. And that ends up being quite pivotal in the Zulzi journey. You want to be unique.
Yeah.
So much so that in 2017, you decide to focus directly on groceries and really optimize just that entire process, right? So there wasn't really any other player. Domestically, one cart had kind of started finding its feet, but it was in different regions. And you focus on collection, engagement, and delivery times.
So I think actually I'll say like when we entered grocery delivery 1 hour, we're probably the first guys to look. One cart came after.
Yes.
Maybe some other guys also tried, but they fudged at that time. Some of them I forgot their names.
Sure.
So at that time, when we were doing $1 million, the Uber Eats came into the space, deep pockets. I remember they were offering like free burgers in Bram. You order like you get a R100 voucher, 200 Rand voucher.
Yeah, I mean you can't compete with that, right?
Yeah, and I remember I even tried to eat those burgers by myself, right? Trying to get those
Take
vouchers.
up all of that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, like it was very clear that to compete with those guys is gonna be very, very difficult, right? And then I looked at and also like I had a lot of experience as well. Remember, like I've done this with textbooks and gadgets against Take-A-Lot, against Kalahari, So I've seen it all, right? In terms of like number one is I have a better understanding of the market here in South Africa in terms of like how many players you can take, right? Like a lot of things you can take it for granted, no matter how good you are, right? There's certain things where you are limited in terms of how much you can innovate, right? So I had that context as well.
Sure.
Like where I knew that in this space, if you're gonna have 2 guys coming like this, your Uber Eats and Mr. D, right? It's gonna be very difficult for the third player to come in and win in this space. Most especially when the guys are coming in and they've got the tech is already ready, it's there, it can scale. They've got partnerships, and you don't have all of those things. So it became clear to me that we're not gonna win in this war, right? So the best thing for us was to look at the category, which in that case I think groceries was like the obvious one, but not obvious to everybody.
Sure.
To me, I looked all over the world. You could see even Amazon trying to enter that category. So to me, it became clear that that's the category that we need to focus on. That's the next category that's going to be big in this space. And you don't want to go there when it's already big. You want to go there before it's big, because you don't have deep pockets. If you've got deep pockets, you can do it. You can do it anytime, right? But if you don't have enough money, you are trying to make a name for yourself, no one will even back you. No one's going to back you to say, go and compete with Zulzi.
Absolutely.
You need to make a name for yourself. Then people can then back you to say, oh, now we trust you that you can actually go and compete with big guys because you have done it over and over again, right? Sure. So for us, like we made a call, and that call was more like betting in the future to say, this is going to be big. And when it becomes big, we want to miss out again. I had missed out on gadgets to the likes of Take-A-Lot, missed out on the food delivery to Mr. D, Uber Eats. This time around, I was like, no, man, I can't I can't miss out on, on the party that's coming, you know. So that's when we started like really refining the grocery, the experience. And funny enough, when I look back as well, when I started doing the analysis of who were the customers who were contributing to the 100,000, I realized that there was actually one customer who used to buy a lot of stuff from Woolies. One customer actually used to order like 100,000 rand worth of groceries on our platform. So you will say like we decided to let go of like many customers on the food space to focus on one customer.
Amazing.
And that customer, I mean, we used to chat on the phone, right? If something is not right, I'll even go there. Like when I go and deliver food to her, she'll tell me that, oh, you are missing this stuff from Woolworth, this category. When you were trying to scrap that data, you didn't get everything. There's this thing that I'm missing, you know.
That's the kind of user feedback people dream of, right?
And user feedback is so hard sometimes, right? Like people, you don't have people who can tell you, right? Like what's going on. So I remember even back then, people will have my phone number. They will call me. A lot of customers will call me and tell me, hey, this, that, until it got to a point where it was just like not practical.
You're still recovering. Yeah, I think from those sleepless nights, I'm sure, right? That focus pays off. So 2017, of course, you get to between 2 and 3 million rand a month in turnover, focusing on the grocery optimization process, right? Collection, engagement, and delivery. Let's quickly talk about the time you decide to raise your first funding. 2017, it's not a big check, I guess, in general venture capital terms, but you raise R1 million at the time. Talk to us about that, because it didn't actually last too long. It was an interesting. Why did you raise? What went? What was that first dynamic like with investors?
I think maybe what was important at the time was the fact that, like, I think we needed a little bit more money.
Okay.
And I think when you bootstrap something, right? There's always going to be a lot of things that maybe are not there, right? So you can just imagine we are every day, right, running this business. It was about borrowing money, like going to the shops, like asking friends to say, can you deposit 50,000 rand to my account, right? So the business itself, when you look at even the financials, there was like things just didn't look right. Yes. Because the money was just cycling. There's money coming in. And I think at that time, we needed a lot more money. I don't think we needed R1 million rand at that time, right? But we're at the situation where we also needed something, like if we didn't have anything was going to help. Just whether it's 500,000 or 1 million. But in fact, what we were looking to raise at the time was 10 million rand, but we ended up with 1 million rand, right? So that 1 million rand just ensured that we could sort of like still be open for another 2 or 3 months, but really take us to the next level that we're looking to get to, because it was already a little bit too late at the stage that we're in. But also from the other side, the investors, they look at this thing, they're like, oh, like there are no numbers here. Like, how do we back this thing? We don't understand what's going on, So it was sort of like, and this is one of the things that, like, you're going to face a lot of time, especially for things that are bootstrapped from scratch. So like, even from the investors, you have to look at like, how do you navigate it? How do you maybe also like try and spend time to understand these things, because at times what I've seen, even, later I'll talk about like even the partnerships that we had to form with retailers, right? People tend to look for the wrong things, and forget what they're buying, So today when I look back, I'm realizing that a lot of investors actually neglected the fact that these guys are so passionate and they can build these things and they're doing it, They are throwing everything at it.
It's just about the numbers, especially in that deal. It's just about the numbers. It was just about the terms they could get, best terms for themselves as investors, I imagine.
Yeah, so for me, like, it's just like, like going forward, you might have to say, oh, maybe this thing can solve it, And again, I see a lot of people really make that mistake over and over again, even retailers, for instance, when we're looking to partner with retailers, they were asking about like, how much are you selling on a platform, right? And when I look back, I realized they were actually making a mistake of asking us, how much are we making, that is supposed to be, you need to really look at like what are the key competencies for these guys. And from our side, what was clear is we were building the best technology. The guys are passionate. We had all the ingredients that I think, if you're looking for someone to invest in, I think we ticked all those boxes. But the moment you start asking something else, right? Like like where you came from, who you dating, those things become irrelevant. You know.
Sure.
So I think there was a lot of mistakes that like investors made as well, right? Because they were not really asking for the right things.
It's a misalignment, and it happens all the time. I think specifically in first or second capital raises.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you guys still need cash because the business is still operating, and there's a lot coming in and going out.
Yeah.
And you actually, by this point, again, we're coming to kind of mid to late 2017. You made enough noise to get the attention of the big corporates, which is, of course, what you want. You've spoken about the importance of partnerships, and one of those big partnerships, of course, is Shoprite.
Yeah.
And they actually approached the business with quite a unique proposition, and it has to do with Zulzi helping to build their on-demand delivery app, right? 6060. Talk to us about just that initial process, and I mean that's obviously a big prospective contract, and I'm sure it was very exciting for the company. But you're now also building a competitor's platform, right? In principle, you're building other companies' platform to compete in the same space. So talk to us through that process.
Yeah, look, I think at that time what was clear to us was, like, I mean, I looked at two things. In fact, when Shoprite came to us, there were multiple offers on the table, right? I think one of the things that we looked at was like, how can you get Shoprite checkers to come into the Zulzi platform, right? But it wasn't interesting for us because, like we still had the problem of like, even if we get them, we don't have someone's going to fund us, So remember, like, it's not like when they come into the platform, all of a sudden
the balance sheet
is profitable, So in fact, we had many offers like that, like where I remember even some of the other retailers that I might not mention. When we went to them, there were some of them offering 2% commission, but I was there asking them, how about if we build tech capabilities for you guys, right? And then you pay us for that, right? Because in that way, then we can survive. But if we just get 2%, we'll still need an investor. And it was very clear that the South African landscape didn't really quite get the space.
Yes.
And now you have grown this business. It needs money, right? The only guy who probably were playing in that space who understand it better was Naspers, and they're not really interested in that space. Even outside the country, it's very clear that they're not playing in the grocery space. So for us, we're a little bit stuck there. Like it was very clear that it's going to be very, very tricky to get the investor who really understand this space. And then Shoprite, we then formed a partnership where we're going to build the 6060 platform. It was a contract where I think from their side, we're thinking these guys, they build this platform and then they leave. And the money was good, really. It was really like, I would say that was our first proper raise, where we knew from that money, at least now we can make things work, right? So the guys really had like a very good foresight. Like they really put a lot of money, and this was way before COVID. A lot of people always think like this thing just happened over
made
COVID.
Sense, but now it was quite fortuitous.
Yeah, it was way before COVID when that deal happened, and as we started working with these guys, right, they immediately saw the value, right? They saw what we can build. We were turning things like that, like the code, like they were getting things like very quickly, and to them it really made a lot of sense that they somehow had to find a way to sort of like have a long partnership with them, right? And that's how they then became an investor on Zulzi.
Amazing. So I mean, it's such a beautiful picture of a proper corporate startup partnership, which sometimes goes wrong, but in some instances with strategic alignment and value alignment and those sorts of things can go very right.
Yeah.
To the point that you raised, 2020, of course, Checkers really want to cement, Shoprite wants to cement this relationship, and so they actually go on to make a 30 million rand investment into the business. In 2020. That's widely publicized, and people can go and read about that online.
Maybe what's important to mention there was not directly at the time, right?
Yes.
So at that time it was via another structure, Empowerment Capital, but it was actually coming from what we're doing with them. On the 6060, it's very clear that there's value, then today, as we sit here, like that stake is now directly, owned by Shoprite Checkers, not via third party.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about COVID, because this is all happening in and around the same time, right? And COVID was massively transformative for the Zulzi business. I think the numbers you quoted me at a point, you guys were doing over 1.5 million rand in turnover per day.
Yeah.
And this was for many South Africans, again, we're talking lockdowns, we're talking inability to leave the house unless you've got certain dispensations or clearance, yourselves being one of those organizations, which is a great place to be in.
Yeah.
And it was often, I think, when I've spoken to a lot of folks, even in our immediate network, this was the first time that they were not really going to try this on-demand grocery delivery, quick commerce thing.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that time, because, it's literally overnight, the switch flips, life as we know it does change somewhat, but it's a great time for the business, presumably. How do you, where do you start? How do you navigate that?
Funny enough, it was to us, it was a little bit, let me say, I wasn't too excited about it. I wasn't too excited about COVID because of two things, right? The first thing is, like, we had a plan, right? Like, we had a plan, and the plan was to move away from picking from retailers.
And you just raised capital to implement that plan.
Yes, we want to implement the plan of opening dark stores. Now COVID hits, you can't open new dark stores, right? So now you're stuck, right? You have this model that you don't really like, because you don't have partnerships with those guys, and the future is now clear that they're not gonna, you don't see them becoming partners, Sure. So COVID hits, here we are still running that model of picking from retailers. And it's scaling. And as it's scaling with a lot of problems as well, right? Like when we entered COVID, I think we had two problems. First of all is we're not really working on the Zulzi platform as such, right? The little resources that we have are working on the 60/60.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what's keeping you alive. So
yeah, we're pushing everything on the 60/60. Like the Zulzi platform itself, we haven't touched it in a long time, right? And all of a sudden now, we need to do everything, like to move away. I think we used to have our own dedicated servers. Now we need to move to AWS, and it must happen today because you're falling over, right? At the same time, you must actually change how you do things. Like database upgrades are happening same day,
And orders are still rolling in, right?
Orders are rolling in. Yeah, orders are rolling in. You need to introduce like slots, deliver the slots, So it was really, there was a lot of pressure. So like I think we managed it well. And then we, on the checker site as well, like, the pressure is on to roll out the 60/60 platform across all the stores. Like we're just doing a trial at the time, right, in few stores.
Sure.
And then you wake up, the CEO is like, we need to be on in all the 100 stores, just overnight. So the pressure was real pressure. But what was important there was like, in fact, even today, I still look back, I'm like, when the guys are passionate, it was a small team. It was a team of like, like when I look at the guys who built, the 60/60 platform, right? The app that you use, the picking process, the whole logic on how orders get assigned, everything. It was a team of 4, Amazing. Right? 4 or 5 people. Wow. And just shows you when people are passionate and dedicated, nothing can stop that, So in fact, even today, I always say, show me the people that are passionate, show me people that are dedicated. They can do anything. And a lot of startups, sometimes you think it's all about money only, right? Money is not enough if the guys are not passionate,
Sure.
So for us, like, we're able to achieve this because guys were working tirelessly. They were committed into trying to make this thing to work, And that's what I always, like, every now and then, I always push the guys to say, but why are we doing this? Why are you telling me this is going to take years to do such a small thing, Because of the passion. In the startups, if there's one thing that you have that's so powerful, is the ability to move quickly. If you're not able to do that, then you have to go back and say, what must I change? And even today, I always ask myself the same question as Zulzi, even at Checkers, to say, guys, like, how do we change this again and become a startup? because it's so easy for people to think, it's just processes, it's just this, right? But, instead of like you having a meeting, let people talk about what they're doing, show me like what we've been doing and let's see it. If you have a problem, let's all see it.
Yep.
And before you know it, you realize that what was supposed to take 3 weeks can be resolved right there, So,
great wisdom.
Yeah, so those are some of the things that I learned through that journey. And even now as Zulzi, like I'm relearning those things to say, damn, like we need to go back to being agile, moving things quickly.
Our foundations, the stuff that made us successful, right?
Yeah. And the startups there mustn't forget that part, that piece as well, that it doesn't matter. Like today, for instance, like I look at everything else. I'm like, okay, cool. When I look back now, I'm actually realizing that if we wanted to succeed in the food space, because you can move quickly, you can succeed. But if you're not able to move quickly, you're not going to succeed.
Sure. Donald, you touched on something quite interesting there, and I know we've only got a couple of minutes left here today, but obviously this was a super high pressure time, and this has been a almost decade-long journey now.
Yeah.
Talk to us quickly about how you handle those moments of pressure. Sometimes it's make or break for many founders, and even here, you raised what was a significant amount of capital in 2020, but the whole game changes. To almost completely do a 180 on what the business is focusing on, where you thought it was going to go, and all these objectives. How do you actually handle pressure like that? Do you have anything that you do? Do you have anything that you can maybe recommend to listeners here today?
Look, I think talk to people as well. Talk to people around you. Tell them about your problems. I think that's one of the things that I do that a lot, right? Like my friends, your partner, when there are problems, share with them, that just helps you to sort of like have people that can, can look at it, even if they don't do anything about it, right? But the most important part as well, just understand that these things are going to work at the end, right? So you also have an option of sitting there worrying so much, right? And then you find that whatever you're worried about is not even a problem, right? So most of the time, in fact, what I also realize is, even though it's so hard, like when you're going through it, right? But over time, what I've realized is, instead of spending so much time worrying, spend a lot of time looking for solutions and looking at the future and say, oh, now when I have a solution, this is how it's going to look like. And there's a lot of value that gets created during crisis. Sure. So what you mustn't forget as a founder is actually looking at like, how will the future look like at any given time? When I've got challenges of cash, when this problem is solved, what am I doing?
It's a great point.
So it's the right time to reflect on what is important, when there are challenges. So it's so funny, like I actually realized that even when there are problems today, right? Like there's a lot of times where I like to, like even my team, right? It's so funny, like I will talk to guys and what they see as a problem, they see what we just resolved now. And I'm actually looking at like, no, actually, I see that we've resolved it. But did you see how many other problems we have, And so like you're not thinking about like what's currently there,
sure.
You think about like, yes, now that we've fixed this thing, but how do we prevent that from happening in the future, And you start like to tackle things to say, oh, okay, cool. Next time we must solve things this way, There's been many times where, like, let's say an order goes wrong, right? And then I always ask, what happened, It's easy for someone to say, oh, no, a driver didn't go there on time.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. It's an easy thing, right? Yeah. But you find that there's many other things, and often you find that some guys who are in tech, they think, no, it's not our fault, right? But when you analyze these things, you realize, oh, the reason why...
We had something to do with this.
Yeah, the reason why maybe this guy could not deliver on time is because they couldn't see that the order is here. They could not get notifications, And before you know it, you realize that there's so many problems that can be solved, So for me, like as an entrepreneur, the moment you sign that you want to be an entrepreneur, it means problems are going to be coming every day.
Yeah.
If they're not coming, then it means you're doing something wrong. So you need to then get used to the problems and even get excited when the problems come to say, okay, cool, now this problem is here. Now this is how I'm going to solve it.
Amazing.
And find many ways to solve it.
Yeah, great wisdom, Don. Let's quickly talk about Zulzi today.
Yeah.
So over the last, since COVID has subsided and things have got slightly back to normal, of course, your team has normalized somewhat as well.
Yeah.
I think these numbers might be even greater. So forgive me, you have started to move to a dark store model alongside the traditional delivery platform. How many stores do we have now at the moment?
Yeah, so at the moment we've got 7 dark stores. So in fact, we are fully on dark stores. So
Amazing.
we don't pick from any retailer.
Okay.
So whatever you order from Zulzi, so you're able to order from us from 6 in the morning until 10 p.m. The full catalog from your alcohol, groceries. We also do pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
So we're going big on pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. You mentioned to me.
So you're able to upload your prescription on the platform. So the areas where we've got our pharmacies, you're able to upload a prescription, and then we can then dispatch the medication, get it delivered very quickly to your door. And then also on the checker side as well, we've continued to grow. That team of 4 is now like sitting at like 35 engineers. And we continue to be a key partner for Shoprite checkers, and that's why they had to also get like a direct stake on Zulzi, because that's how critical it is to their business. So I think I'm currently enjoying the relationship we have with them. It has taken a lot of effort to get to where it's at. But this is definitely one of the, I think we'll look back and we'll have a very successful case of a startup working with a big corporate that we can look back and say, this is how they were able to do it, And this is all happening because there's commitment from both sides to want to make this work, And I think, that has been incredible.
Don, you're focusing on, now the business has got such exciting prospects. Obviously focusing on the dark store space, close to 100 people employed at HQ now. Possibly more, because I know you guys are always hiring aggressively, which is super exciting. Talk to us about the future. What does the next 2 to 3 years look like for Zulzi?
Biggest focus now is healthcare, definitely. I think we are really focusing a lot more on healthcare. We really want to bring that integrated experience. Currently, if you think about that experience of healthcare, you have to go to a doctor. They give you like a book that you must write stuff there, not digital. You get a script, you must now go to a pharmacy, queue and you're sick. You're not doing this. You're happy, excited, and looking forward to do it. It's like you're sick, So we are really bridging that gap. That's why we started with the pharmacy part, where you can now upload your script, but we have bigger plans in terms of also really digitizing the script, so that like by the time you go to a doctor, by the time you get home, the medication meets you at the gate, So those are some of the critical things that we're working on. We think healthcare is going to be there's a massive room to innovate there. Even our teams, for instance, things like even reading the scripts now, the guys have been using a lot of AI to sort of like read the scripts, without having someone capture it manually, So there's definitely a lot of scope in which one can innovate in the healthcare space. And I think we're definitely going to pioneer that space.
So much value in building great technical IP, right? To then pivot into whatever vertical you guys feel, whether it's healthcare now and then a couple of years into the next big opportunity. I think Zulzi's well positioned to really capture this last mile quick delivery market.
No, definitely. I think, being able to, build great teams, it just means you can do anything, So I think for Zulzi is well positioned to really move quickly and get more market share in that space.
Amazing.
So I definitely think the healthcare will be the next space that will really come back.
You're going to save me a trip to the pharmacy. I can tell you. Don, very quickly, we like to ask our guests one question just before we close out today, and it's, what does success look like for Donald? So, you're an older man one day and you might be sitting on the stoop somewhere and you're reflecting back on all of this. What does success actually look like? Is it financial? Is it having balance in your life. You know, is it a desert island somewhere with a super yacht, whatever? And of course, we don't hold the answer against you. But what does that look like for Donald Valoyi?
I think for me, I realized that my success will be transforming people's lives, right, in South Africa. I think when you have all of these things, right, my passion really lies more on taking guys who maybe might not have had an opportunity and giving them an opportunity to become something in life, you know. So I find myself wanting to do more of that, you know. Even when we, you know, as Zulzi, the dark stores will operate, the fact that I can give an opportunity to someone to come work in the dark store, I can give an opportunity to a driver. Those are really my passion projects. So I think for me, that's what I want to do, like really transform. South Africa, I think is you know, like we live in two worlds, right? Like, you know, the other guys who are doing well, the other guys with no hope.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest part that we need to do, all of us, right, is to how do we bring hope to the guys who are hopeless, you know? And I think for me, that's what will make me excited, you know? I always get excited when I go to the village and just even like creating a little bit of few jobs there to say, guys can come and do this. That's exciting to me, and I want to do more of that.
Absolutely amazing. And I think well positioned, and may it long continue.
Thank you so much.
Donald, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Startup Club podcast today. We'll be following the Zulzi journey very closely, and we wish you nothing but success.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It was a pleasure, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. That was Donald Valoyi, founder and CEO of Zulzi. And if you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to subscribe to our channels, follow us on social, and be sure to share this with your community. I'm Mathew Marsden, and this was the Startup Club podcast. See you next time.